All right, I think we're live. So welcome everyone. If you're on, thank you for jumping in this call with us. This is our second edition ever of Ask Us Anything, where we have gathered some awesome Blue Team folks, and we're going to just roll through Q&A questions from the audience. So that's going to, oops, sorry, got the tab open on the other screen. My name is John Hubbard. I'm a Blue Team instructor with the SANS Institute, as are my two folks here, and maybe one more joining as well. We are looking for questions from you about really anything and everything, and we will do our best to answer those. I'm the owner of this channel. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and you will see anytime we go live from here on out. Beyond that, there's our other attendee here, Mark Orlando as well. We're going to be taking questions, as I said. Participate as much as you can. Ask us questions, talk with us, talk with each other. We're going to be rolling through a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll keep going while the questions keep going until we all die from starvation or there are no more questions left. So with that, I will kick it over to, let's say, Ryan. We can do some intros here real quick, and then we'll get going.
All right. Hey, folks. My name is Ryan Chapman. I can be found at RJ_Chap. I don't know why I made my name RJ. I never go by RJ. In fact, I don't like to be called RJ. So I've built my online persona on the wrong name, but whatever. I am a SANS instructor for Forensics 610, reverse engineering malware, and I'm currently, as of now, can officially announce that I'm currently authoring Forensics 528, ransomware for incident responders. Super excited about that. And I work as a principal IR consultant on a day-to-day basis. And I also run CactusCon, which is Arizona's security/hacker conference. So we have our stuff online, cactuscon.com/YouTube. We just had our little shindig virtual event in February. And next February, we'll be hopefully doing a hybrid/live event.
Awesome. Hi. Justin, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Justin Henderson. I'm here to get you motion sickness, right? I'm out and about with the family, planning time well, but it's all good. I'm glad to be here. Kids in the background, I'm going to kick them out in a second and it'll all be good. But I'm author of 555, Sim with Tactical Analytics, 530, Defense for Superior Architecture and Engineering, and crazy enough to be here. So over to you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Mark Orlando. I'm a SANS instructor specializing in Blue Team and SOC. I teach, along with John, Sec 450, Blue Team Fundamentals and Security Operations. And John and I just completed the brand new, longer version of Management 551, Building and Leading Security Operations Centers. I'm also a co-founder of Bionic Cyber, which is a Blue Team focused consultancy. Good to see everybody.
Fantastic. So we've got a crew here of some of my favorite Blue Teamers on Earth, and I'm hoping that we can get a bunch of awesome questions from the audience. Looks like someone's already saying they're jealous of your background there, Ryan, which I totally am as well. I don't know how you got all that awesome art there, but great work. We had a question that came in way early this week. So while people are still getting logged in here and thinking up stuff, it goes all the way around.
Triforce. He's got the Triforce, John.
Yeah, right. You got to get you one of the 450 coins. That question you had before, if you could read that out loud and we can kick it off from there. For those who don't know, Ryan, as he said, obviously is writing our course on ransomware to come out. I don't know when. It'll be a while. It takes a lot of effort to write a course. Mark and Justin and I can all vouch for that. But does this stuff all day, every day. Very, very intelligent on the inner workings, the technicalities, and the fixes for ransomware. So especially today, if you have any ransomware questions, be sure to get those out because Ryan is here and he will answer those for you. So let's kick it off, Ryan, with that question you had.
Yes. So from Phil Moore, another SANS instructor, we have a question. Because of time zones, he won't be able to make it, but he's keen to hear our take on disclosure of ransomware decryption tool releases. And so I probed him a bit, and specifically in reference to if a security researcher or entity or group or whatever comes up with a methodology, a way, a bypass, whatever you want to call it, to decrypt, essentially releasing that as a tool to the public, to the not the public, how we all feel about that. So, I think really it depends on who you ask and what kind of day they're having. Also, maybe how financially motivated they are. So as an incident response consultant, what we do is we deal with people who get hit with ransomware attacks. If we had a capability to decrypt our clients' files, that would be phenomenal. That'd be awesome, right? If you pay the ransom fee, then you often will get a decryptor, which sometimes is actually a decryptor, and other times is just another piece of malware for your environment. You have to be very careful with those. If you're gonna pay a ransom in general, and they give you another executable, don't just willy-nilly execute that. But some of those have been, those are fairly well known for the bigger attack groups, and getting those files, the executables, the portable executables, it can be kind of eye-opening, but many times they still use asymmetric key encryption, and the specific tool built for you just happens to include your key, and then, okay, sure, group 1 or group A or whatever can go ahead and decrypt their stuff. It won't really be useful at all because the key is still unknown, to other people. So certain tools, however, or certain variants, I should say, like a good example that Phil brings up is Darkseid. So the Darkseid ransomware had a decrypt publicly available. So some researchers were like, oh, look, we could just decrypt all this stuff, and released it. So that then brings about the question of, should these types of tools, should their existence be ever brought up? And if it should, in what channels? So, personally, I love the idea of open sourcing all the things in general. But the second you open a tool like this, the second it becomes public knowledge, right? Essentially, that tool is then that group is going to retool their work almost immediately, right? Why wouldn't they? To protect their interests, right? Their business venture. So I'm not really, to be honest, I don't really know how I feel about it, because from one day to the next, I have a different opinion on it. I really, really love to see when a client has been encrypted and realizes, oh, snap, we can recover, and I don't care what it is, because of X, Y, or Z. We have full backups going, 90 days on every server. Like, oh, okay, cool. Let's just recover all your stuff. Now, we're not even talking about data exfiltration associated with ransomware. That's a whole other thing, right? But if it's a tool that can be released, you have to look at it as a utilitarian kind of viewpoint. The more people who can get their hands on it now, the better. I think one thing that should be brought into the conversation, and I'll shut up here and let you guys jump in, is I recommend every time someone gets ransom, always make images, make backups of your servers that have been encrypted. So a lot of times folks will blow those servers away and then move on, right? Well, make a backup of the files and the server itself for multiple reasons, not just for incident response and the blue teamers to do our job, right? So you can get back to the business operations. But also, it's highly possible, I don't know about highly, but it's possible that down the line, there will be a decryption tool that comes out, or a decrypted methodology that comes out. And that can be extremely useful if you happen to have that backed up, if you have the money to store away that much data. So what do you guys think about that general concept?
That's a really hard one. I don't have an answer, but here's how I look at it. Very much like the offensive security tools argument, right? Do we want to have tools available that in theory make us better, but also once they're out there can also be used for bad, or in this case can be used to quickly turn around and make things bad again? That's one of those things that, I don't know how you judge whether it's good or bad. And I think it just depends on which end of it you end up on. If you're the benefactor of that thing coming out, you love it. But if you hit it at the wrong time, you get the fresh round of stuff that doesn't work with that anymore. I don't know if there's any clear way to say one way or the other, but it's one of those interesting debates that, as long as we stay ahead of people and people can keep making them, maybe it's okay, but hard to say. Anyone else want to add anything else on that one? Because I see we have a few questions coming in here from the audience we can jump to.
I like your answer. It depends on the day.
Yeah.
Depends on the day.
Gray area at best, right?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep. You can make an argument for certain groups. Like, I'll throw one name out there. Coveware is a very well-known organization that deals with proxying communications between threat groups who have ransomed and the victims who have been ransomed. Mm-hmm. Say we banana. Peel the banana. Sorry. I threw my alarm off. Anyway, a little Family Guy love there. Or where was I? If you limit, say a tool like this comes out or a capability, there are many trust groups out there, some of which, those of us on the call are probably in. What if you limit the release to those trust groups, right? At what point do you traffic light protocol the tool or the mechanism or methodology, right? Whatever it is. And then what if you, for example, say, okay, well, we're going to give it to, like Beasley Insurance. Beasley is a very large insurance carrier that does a lot of ransomware cases. What if they're the only one that has their hands on it? Well, then it just feels like you're not giving the masses that opportunity. You're restricting it, but by restricting it, is that the greater good? Maybe it's only the people who have cyber insurance then and can pay a lot of money, and they all of a sudden they get to recover. But then even the decently sized, like they can't recover. Like that sucks. So, I love the idea of making the threat actors play the cat and mouse game and keeping them on their toes. But it's really one of those, like, it's really utilitarian kind of a methodology. So I think that for the most part, I believe that I'm personally for it. And this has nothing to do with day job. By the way, this is just Ryan speaking. But you're going to have to take the bad with the good. I love seeing the tool releases, and I love just seeing, like, even on Reddit, people are like, oh, I work, at my work, we just decrypted all this stuff. Like, this is so awesome. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good feeling, So
Yep.
Could you truly just hide it and let everyone decrypt all the things in private? It's not going to happen. The more it gets out, the more it's going to be known. So,
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. Let's move on to our next question here, which I think is probably going to be best addressed to Justin, I think. How do you manage monitoring Linux systems? Audit D is a pain.
Audit D is a pain. Anybody who says otherwise is totally lying to you, right? Well, there's a couple things on this. First off, good news is Sysmon is coming to a Linux system near you, right? It's in progress. It works really well for Windows. They keep promising it for Linux, but I think they will uphold that promise. It's just not here yet. So in the future, I think Sysmon's going to be a huge help. Past that, right now, the most equivalent is Audit D, which is not designed to do the same thing Sysmon does. It's painful because Audit D was designed to let you log and audit whatever the heck you want. So it's actually too granular, too broad. So we still need it. Usually what I recommend is starting with Florian Ross Audit D config. But realistically, I think one of the things we keep missing out on is Linux default logs, in my opinion, and you all can weigh in on this, are actually better than Windows default logs. Sysmon is needed for Windows because the Windows defaults are horrible. Even within Windows, you can tune it and make it better, but Linux by default is actually, it's halfway decent. There's things we need to get, like if someone closes out a bash history incorrectly, you don't get command line logging at all. Okay, that's problematic, but you can do Audit D, you can do Snoopy Logger, like there's options. To me, the bigger issue isn't actually Linux, it's Mac. Mac is like a redheaded stepchild that nobody wants to do logging on. Like the best I've seen is OS Query has some really good detects, but I'm tired of hearing that because OS Query is it's not really a real-time logging mechanism. It's more of ad hoc. If anything, it's more like instant response as you query and do stuff. So it's not apples to apples. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are with Linux or especially Mac, but
I'll jump. I love OS Query, but I also hate OS Query because I hate SQL. Ew, it's so icky. I love the ability to script out, your queries, and I love having that data just collected on the endpoints. And even if you're in an environment that doesn't have a log aggregator or a SIM or even a syslog box, which, I mean, come on, set up a syslog box. But even if you don't have that and you just have those queries firing and just saving those results to disk and you're getting all that information, even just doing something like what processes are running every 10 minutes and pushing that to disk, netstat AN or whatever, like every 10 minutes, and just popping that to the disk, rotating it every 30 days or whatever, at least you have something even on the box that you can go take a look at. And I think that it really does augment those default Linux logging capabilities. And I'm with you. I think those facilities are pretty good. When we're looking at the last file and wtemp and vtemp and all these things in an incident, like we just go like, oh, look, they connected right there. Like it's pretty decent, for SSH session tracking and things of that nature. So I like OS Query. I think building a UI for it is very, very useful. But again, from my perspective, I'm an IR guy, right? So just like you said, I probably have it, I'm seeing it through my IR lens.
Yep, those darn IR forensicators. I mean, come on. No, I think part of the issue with Linux from a logging perspective is the reason Sysmon or the equivalent like EDR is so necessary on Windows is we're talking desktops, workstations, laptops, not just servers. Linux, I mean, not to be whatever, but a lot of the Linux systems that I have monitoring, they're servers and servers and servers, which at that point, I tend to care more about authentication or the actual application itself. I mean, process logs are still super helpful, but they're dramatically more helpful on workstations. So it's that fact. I feel like that factors in too. If you use Linux as your main operating system, or again, Mac, that is where I'm a bit more concerned, because you need to address the challenge even more so, because it could have been the starting infection point.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would add to that is maybe like, don't forget that you can always create your own logs. There was a past webcast that Justin and I did called Automation Nation that I always find myself referring back to, where we show this is Windows, but the same thing obviously applies in Linux. Like with PowerShell, you can very easily call a few commandlets, create yourself a new Windows event channel, and throw literally anything you want in there. So if you need to log something as part of a security use case, don't forget that you can always just create your own logs with a script, with whatever tool you want, throw them in there, collect those things, bring them in. Audit D is incredibly painful in some cases. And if you really just need a few basic fields on what something is doing, or access logs or anything like that, you may be able to actually create those things yourself. So I don't know if Mark, if you had anything to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of to follow on to what Ryan was saying, like, I think, at the end of the day, like, obvious disclaimers aside, depends what your Linux infrastructure looks like. But, I think there generally is less of a need to get really precious about like fringe threat hunting use cases and like analytics, and much more important just to be able to like grab basic system information, kind of to Ryan's point about like, key pieces of information, look for changes on the system and usual activity. Yeah, I think, sometimes we get so caught up with being able to do things like threat hunting and endpoint analytics, in like non or less common operating systems. We forget that, we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. So
yeah,
I think I would just.
Fantastic. All right, next question. As a blue teamer, should you be fluent in both ELK and Splunk, as in Lucene and SPL specifically, the query languages, for those who aren't familiar with those acronyms or names? Is it practical to be a master in both? Anyone want to jump on that one?
Hi, Ankit. I just want to say hi first. Hello.
I think it's possible. I don't know if it's practical to stay an expert in both. At least for me, like, I tend to relearn like at least 30% of any query language on any given day based on like what tool I have to use. So I think, whatever you have, it's very important to have, a mastery of the relevant query language. Maybe
so
that's
Mark,
like an obvious answer.
No. Can I want to challenge you on that one, Mark.
Let's have it. Let's have it.
It's on. Do you really need to be a master of either? Like, even if you only had one, I always argue you don't technically need to be a master even of the one you have. You just need to live dangerously and vicariously through it. Like, if sloppy searches that technically work get you to the end goal, I'm actually okay with that, as long as you feel you're actually getting to the end goal. I feel like in that question is kind of the rooted of the InfoSec lie, in that you have to be a master. Like, I consider myself a master of ELK, but I was pretty dang dangerous before I would hit that level, I thought. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more about the processes, the mindset, like especially your guys' 450 or the management spinoff from it. Like, I feel it's more important to have the background knowledge than tool knowledge.
I think, yeah, and having just written a course with John, I think he would be the first to tell you that I am the master of just getting to the end and like doing enough to, make it happen. No, totally agree. I think you make a really good point about there's this myth that you have to be like a ninja on whatever. But I stand by what I said with it just kind of depends. And there's no need to like learn both just to be able to say, you know, both. Like be able to use what you have, I think is my point.
Yeah.
I think
Sure.
Justin just made every Splunk admin like freak out. Like,
I
no.
was going to highlight this comment,
Yes.
which brings very
No,
well
that
what I
made me
was
laugh,
going to
yeah.
say to light, which is you may not need to be a master. There are certain things that you can spend the time to master, but everything cannot be that thing. So, the way I would approach this is like, what should I spend my time prioritizing? And if you happen to have an Elk deployment and you happen to have a Splunk deployment, which is possible in some places. Now, I would say that's not the most common setup, but certainly, a lot of people have one of them.
It's pretty common.
Yeah,
It's
I
pretty
know it's
common.
out there, right? It's not like everyone, but yeah, obviously your priorities should drive what you spend your time on and what's going to be the most useful to you. Do you have to be like the number one master in the world? No, but you also shouldn't, in my opinion, fumble your way through with index equals star on things unless you know you have to do that. Because as you do that, right, yeah, you may get to the answer, but how many other people are not getting answers because you are getting your answer, right? With a query like that, everyone can't be doing that same thing. And so you would be bringing the whole team
If
down.
your query crashes the sim, you might need a little more proficiency.
Yeah.
Well, I can speak to this question personally. I've actually given talks at 6 different Splunk conferences, 4 lives and 2 .confs. And I was on the Splunk Technical Champions Council, and I carried a Splunk backpack to work every day. I love me some Splunk. So this was been my current job now for about 2 years, and we're a complete Elk shop. Everything's Elk, no Splunk at all, right? I had not yet had a client where Splunk was an urgent need, although very recently a client was like, hey, you're a Splunk guy. How do I do so-and-so? And it was something like fairly simple. I Googled it. I didn't remember it at all, man. I had to Google it. And I was thinking to myself, damn, I used to use Splunk for, freaking hours a day. And I just completely forgot it. So I really don't think you can be a master of both or even a proficient user of both unless you're actively using both. You just lose it. That's my experience.
And of course, that goes for nearly any tool, right? Get as good as you need to be at all the tools and better if you can. But, you can't master everything because no one has that much time. Question from Fleetus here. Hello, Fleetus. Thoughts on Crippled Log Stream? This is not a product I'm familiar with. I don't know if anyone on this call is.
I can't say that I am on that one.
No.
Okay. I Googled it while we were talking, and it looks nice. But you've stumped us. Congratulations.
Good job, please.
If anyone has any comments in the audience, this is not a one-way from us to you based on your question. If anyone knows anything about it, please throw that in the chat room as well. Let's see. As a career pivoter in security without any previous security work experience, but is actively working on degree certs, active in CTF, cyber ranges, and documenting it all as blogs on a website. How, two-parter, can I make myself stand out in an entry-level SOC analyst interview? What would impress each of you? Who wants to go first here?
I mean, you kind of, sorry, Ryan, you're being polite, and I was just talking. No, I'm sorry, man. So good to see you. I think you said it right in the first part of the question. Like, get out there, get involved. Especially these days, right? It doesn't take a lot to like tune into a webcast or like something like this, or we've got, plug for the SAN summits, they're free, they're online, like, the CTFs, the ranges, write it up, get some of your thoughts out there. I think just have something to point to. We used to say you had to do that to prove that you were like passionate about security. I think that that's less important these days, but it does show that like you have an interest, you're learning, you're taking the initiative. And that's what I expect out of SOC analysts is you can learn, you can take the initiative, you can kind of digest things and then, do that analysis. So I think you're on the right track, it sounds like. But Ryan, what do you think?
Exactly what you said. I was just going to repeat back exactly what Rodney had written here. I was going to say, you basically start your interview with, this is what I'm doing. Explain, mention webcasts, mention who you're following on Twitter, but not just the things that you're seeing and reading, but how you follow up on them and how you actually or actively pursue those things, and take notes on all your stuff. Let us know. I used to do a lot of interviews for SOC jobs, a lot. I want to hear about your projects. I want to hear about the work that you've been putting in. Attending, 20 webcasts is one thing, but attending one webcast and hearing about a tool like, Cripple, say you hear about it, you're like, what's Cripple? And you go and you look at it and you're like, hey, I got it. I installed it, doing a POC. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And just, even if you're like, oh, I failed for 35 hours, but I learned these 3 things. Boom. Cool. Awesome. That's what you want to show, is that your enthusiasm to go forward and learn, because that's what you do in a SOC, is you consistently and constantly learn.
Justin, I know you've recently done this exact activity.
Yeah. So, I interview way too many people. Firing everybody. You have to hire. No. So, I'm going to answer this one, and I actually got about to spend time with the family. But there's one huge problem I'm seeing. Like, you might have passion. You might have even done some of these hands-on experience. Like, I'm pushing a massively huge YouTube series on building the most enterprise lab you can. And I'm proud of that. And if you can do that, that's great. That's not going to do you any good if you keep your mouth shut. And I don't know how many times I interview people that they have, nice GX certs that are super expensive. They have on their resume, I have a blog, I do these things. And it, like, to Ryan's point, you're highlighting your projects. You're assuming that the interviewer, clicked the link and actually checked it out. The interview is actually bidirectional. I'm asking you things because I want to learn certain things. You're asking things because you want to learn things from me. And it's okay to brag during an interview, even if you're shy, because it's not about being cocky. It's not about even proving you're the most passionate person in the world. It's that we're trying to see if there's a fit. Like the most recent hire I had, like, he had all these cool things that had I dived into his resume, I could have found them out. But it's not that I don't care, because I do. Everybody's fighting time. And so the interview kind of started off a bit rough. And then my partner was the one who actually drilled into it and started asking questions. And then it's like, the bells are ringing. This is awesome. I didn't know it. Why didn't you say anything, dude? And it's because he was shy. And you have, like, I don't care if you're an S-type personality on the disc. You're trying to get a job. You're trying to change your career. Unfortunately, it can be uncomfortable. But you got to put yourself out there. You've done all this work, hundreds, thousands of hours. You've got college degrees. Fight for yourself this one time. And then once you land the job, it's okay if people adapt to your personality. And that might be a little harsh, actually, but there's truth to that.
Yeah, you guys probably covered everything that I would generally say. Before you go, Justin, there's one final question here that I'm going to not let you go until you answer.
Snort, Suricata, Zeek, which one of them is better in terms of visibility and detection? Well, it's not Snort.
X.
Yeah, so X Snort. So to me, it's Suricata versus Zeek. And this, I might give you a little bit of a shocking answer here. My go-to, if I had to pick one versus the other, which you don't, first off, right, would be Suricata, because it's network metadata plus an IDS plus app control. However, if I'm in a large IoT shop, Zeek's probably better, because there's better IoT support and more modules. So I think it's environmentally or architecturally dependent. But the great answer is, short of Snort, you can have all the things. You could have Snort and Zeek, Suricata and Zeek, and every NSM deployment I've seen, even the commercial ones under the hood, it's some type of IDS plus Zeek, or nowadays, they're all interconnected. Like a connection ID from Suricata flips over to a UID in Zeek in NMS or NDR, if you want to call it that, whatever the new spin on it is so much more advanced than when I grew up. And it's a good thing. And I had this conversation earlier today. It's not EDR versus NSM or EDR versus NDR. A quarter has two faces, heads and tails. If you file off one half, you can't turn that into the bank and get 25 cents. Start using both and quit making it an either or. Come on, guys. We need some love out here. We need both sides.
Or you merge them together and call it XDR, right?
XDR.
Oh.
I had to say it.
Justin, because the last two answers have been poetry.
Real quick, Justin, for those who may not be familiar why you immediately kicked out Snort, could you elicit your answer, or continue your answer on why that part was?
Sure. I used to be a huge Snort fan to the point where I wouldn't even try Suricata. Suricata, though, from its infancy, really has had better logging with its extensible event format, the E format. Plus, it supports Unified 2 if you have something that requires that binary format. The app control has worked from day one. The multi-processor, and I know Snort 3 has a lot of this in the new Rust stuff. So I don't think Snort is actually out of the picture. It's just Snort took so long to get Snort 3 out that if you look for community documentation, integrations, threat feeds, you name it, it's Suricata and Zeek over and over and over. Snort's unfortunately late in the game, and the new features, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, aren't enough to make me swing back the other way. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Ryan, when you're doing
head out, everybody. Have fun.
Justin.
Bye, Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Ryan, when you're doing an incident based on these three tools, is there anything that you are particularly fond of in one and not the other? They already have made the choice. Now we have to deal with it has this, it doesn't have this.
So most incidents we don't run into Zeek. I'm a huge Zeek. I still like to call it bro. I'm a huge bro fan. I came from a very large bro shop, if you will. Oh, so good. Suricata can be very, very helpful, especially when they have the ET Pro tools Pro Tools, wrong audio rules. And if they makes even just slightest weird detections, I have a case right now, literally, where I'm writing a report today where a Suricata rule fired on an SSL certificate, and it was like interpreter or other reverse. It was Cobalt Strike, but just that. Using that and then looking at its SMB transfers, we were able to pull out the heads of some of these unknown executables. Unfortunately, they were all packed and really didn't have enough actually captured because of how their Suricata was configured. Its snap length for that part of the binary was just too short by the default. So Suricata can be great, but I have to echo Justin on having both. It's so good. UIDs and matching them between, Zeek SMTP, watching an email come in, and then just pivoting over to Zeek HTTP and watching, the what do they call it? The depth length. I can't remember the exact name of the field off the top of my head right now, but depth 1, 2, 3, 4, and just watching the session go down. You're like, okay, they clicked that and then went there. Like it's gold, man. I love it. I absolutely adore it. So having both of them is awesome. If I had to pick one or the other, I think it really depends on what type of IR it is and how much hunting you may need to do versus how much reliance on proper alerting. What I normally see is Zeek is not usually configured very well for actual Zeek modules and rules. Rather, it's deployed and it's run against like packet captures or just direct capture off the network, and those run through it. And then you're able to use that to rebuild things that you find yourself. Whereas Suricata and IR typically will give you a heads up like, hey, something stupid happened over there. And then using other logs like firewall logs, DNS, whatever, you rebuild and find out what happened. Having them both together is that happy medium of like, oh, Suricata says something stupid happened over there, and then I trace it through Zeek. So both.
Awesome. Mark, anything to add on that one? I think
we killed it. I think that horse did.
They covered it exactly how I kind of feel on the thing. I love them both. Different things, different tools, but both, I'm looking for good logging and accurate detection. So it's also obviously, dependent on deployment. All right, next question. Tool/solution selection. What are your thoughts on organizations that only seem to adopt solutions that show up on the Gartner Magic Quadrant when clearly there are open source alternatives?
I think if you're not in the Magic Quadrant, like, are you even a tool? You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know about you guys. Like, I usually like Gartner to tell me pretty much everything that I want to do in the SOC.
Always up, always right, all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Like open source, like, come on. I feel like this is I feel like this question has been submitted just to get a rise.
Or is based on a situation that's already playing out right now.
I'm sure it is. No, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Yeah, I mean, it's the classic, like, I actually get why people, push COTS solution, commercial off-the-shelf tools that are in Gartner, because, it's that, what's the saying, like, no one ever got fired for buying Cisco or IBM or insert, big vendor here. Because it's like a lot of these tools that we use are kind of like, black magic when you get up out of the SOC, right? And people don't know, people that are writing the checks, they don't know the difference between Zeek and Corelight and, why this IDS is better than that IDS or whatever. So to be able to have like industry data, something that they can point to say, like, this is why we're purchasing this, it is compelling. Like, joking aside, I get that. I would say, and then I'll shut up. I would say the key here is not necessarily to fight those battles up front, because if that's what your organization is looking for, you're not going to be able to get those proof points for like your favorite open source project. But if you're building your capability with the like validation and assessment approach like in mind, you're validating your solutions, you're getting good metrics out of like how successful you are. You're benchmarking like, okay, what is this next gen firewall doing for me today versus what do I need it to do for me? If you're tracking that data and you can kind of demonstrate over time, or better yet, if you're doing some like active testing of those controls and you can say like, well, this, here's some scientific data that shows why we need to have this solution over that solution. To me, I think that's really where you're able to make that argument. If you have a very conservative organization that's going to look for that industry data, you can't just say no and push back. You have to have some other data to put up against that. That's kind of my view. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to open source options versus whether it's, the top solution or not, I'm always saying like open source solutions are ridiculously good now compared to at least where they were in the past. And so no longer is it as easy to just say, oh, we got to buy something because that's clearly the only option. Now, what you're paying for, what might be $1 million product versus the free option is the difference between the free option and the $1 million product, which is significantly less than the gap between I have nothing or $1 million product. And so, doing that comparative analysis and kind of saying like, hey, we might be able to save a ton of money here and only lose 1% of what we would need to be able to do. That might be important for certain solutions. Depending on how deep you need to go, it's very possible you can find a perfect solution for you out of the open source tool set. So yeah, I think, in general, to the question, it would be slightly foolish to completely write off open source. It would be understandable to do that maybe if you had the mindset of the past and some of the quality and support that was not available previously, but things have gotten really, really good for the blue team. Ryan, is there anything you want to throw into that one before we move on?
There's an ongoing controversy on whether or not Gartner or groups just like it are pay to play. The comment is that it's official comment is it's not. There's, NetScout had a huge issue back a couple of years, and not to drudge up too much weird stuff, but I have seen some companies and I've seen their testing with Gartner and I've seen how that occurs. And I think that a lot of the controversy may come around the fact that they have some of the sales engineers or folks who may be tasked with performing that testing may not just be the best people to do it. And so I find that sometimes you may have items misplaced because of that in the quadrants, right? And then on top of that, I think personally, the more open source we can get, the better for me. I say that, but meanwhile, if you have a Palo Alto firewall, I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. Yeah. So, for firewalls. But I think it also goes back to, off the shelf stuff. It definitely has its place because folks like you fellas, I'm no longer even really in that ballpark anymore. I was on a certain NSM team member. I was a secondary for a large Splunk deployment and Palo and FireEye and a couple other things. I haven't done that in years. And personally, I would be like, oh, I got to relearn this stuff to set it up. Using it, yeah, I'm all over it, right? But you folks are very hard to come across. And so many organizations, they will benefit from not having to try to train up all the people and rather being able to not just go with the commercial solution because, oh my goodness, how many times do we see utter failures of just buying it and deploying it and then like, hey, we're protected, So they have to then also get the professional services hours to make, hopefully sure that it's giving you all that it's capable of giving you and tuned for your environment. So, I think that if you truly understand that you're making that decision to go with what's offered or even viable for the quadrants, then, it's a pretty good way to look at it. But there will be misplacements, and usually it's a human process issue, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah. Training is another thing, right? If you're going to spend the money on the tool, make sure you spend the money to teach people how to use the tool. That's another thing I see failed on a lot there. So that's something I certainly wanted to throw in. All right, moving on to our next question. What are your go-to resources for keeping up with adversary tactics?
No substitute for direct observation. So
your own network.
Instrument your network and watch the show, and make sure you learn from what you're seeing. That's my favorite one. What do you guys think?
What if you have a perfect network and you've never seen it?
If you have a perfect network, then you're not doing the right things. You're just not seeing it.
Ryan, where are you going to keep up on ransomware and all that kind of stuff, aside from what you actually see in your job?
Quite honestly, again, what you see on the day-to-day, and especially as a consultant, and especially with ransomware, like that's what we do, right? We get a ton of it. Aside from that, it's hard to not mention MITRE and, to be like, oh yeah, MITRE, it's so common, it sucks. No, it's still freaking solid. And it's still really good to be familiar with all that stuff. I think some people see MITRE and they just fall into the MITRE hole, as I call it, where they only focus on those tactics. They're like, what number is that? What tac T what? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's just focus on this. Personally, for me, Twitter, I follow, a couple thousand people on Twitter. Just learned, it was yesterday, about side loading for WebEx because of a known trust for locations and DLLs. And just these random, tactics that then immediately get picked up. But quite honestly, it's really hard for me to say, just follow people on social media or on Twitter, because over many years, I've curated a list of folks I really want to follow, right? Both of you being on that list, duh. But it's really hard to be like, just follow people on Twitter, because like, where are they going to go for like hacking? Just follow random people. That's probably not the best idea. That works really well for me, though, is also networking with folks like yourselves, especially if whatever type of business or organization that you're in, whatever vertical that is, or if you're in consulting, that's one thing. If you work in aerospace or retail or whatever, information sharing groups, and getting into, what's the big financial one that I'm blanking on right now?
FSISAC.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely blanked on that. Yeah, be part of those groups and actually read the content they send out. Oh, we're getting hit with this stuff. It's hitting our POS, systems. These are the tactics we're seeing that are slightly new. Like that's gold. Like, use that stuff. It's important.
Yeah, there are, to that I would add like crap loads of podcasts and like additional YouTube channels and stuff that's come out as everyone, has been home over the last year. So, I think there's been a proliferation and awesome just websites and blogs and other things to search out. Beyond that, like there are some, I guess further on that, there are some really, really good blogs out there, stuff like Defer Report and other ones. Like just the general, like if you just go to Bleeping Computer and like look at the headlines and then like click and follow the sources and just see wherever they got their info and then like traverse through those things. Like usually those kind of websites, Bleeping Computer, InfoSec Industry, and just all of the like CrowdStrike and FireEye blogs and all that kind of stuff. The people who see like the really intense hacks and help clean those things up always have, you know, really, really good information and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite sources. Let's see, what do we got next? Been burned by using open source software that wasn't supported by one person. It could be risks. Okay, here we go. Hamza, why mapping detections to network telemetry is so limited in comparison to endpoint in open frameworks such as attack? And I think there might be a second part to this here. What can we get from network data sources to map network detections other than flow, app protocol, and network connections?
First off, I think you're right. I mean, you're right. It's not as common to see the network flow data included in a, hey, look for this, look for that, look for this. Fingerprinting, I would say, is a big thing. You know, SSL fingerprinting has become the rage, you know, these days. JA3 type of stuff. I would think another thing, I don't know if that really applies. I guess Yara over something like Lycabos probably doesn't. Flow, app, protocol, network connections. Yeah, that doesn't apply there.
I'm trying to think. Network mapping detections to network telemetry limited in comparison to endpoint. Some of the reason for that might just be that, you know, the network is like you're sending packets, right? And you're parsing it and you're looking at IPs, you're parsing it and you're looking at you know, layer 4, right? Ports, you're looking at TLS details, or you're looking at the content of layer 7. And then usually it's going to be layer 7 stuff, right? So you go into parsing of that. And then from inside there, it's like a lot of attackers are just going to use HTTP because it blends right in, right? And they're going to encrypt it too, of course, so you don't even see it in the first place. But when a lot of the attacks and specific maybe tactics and techniques might be based around just different I don't know, I wouldn't say protocols, but different things being sent back and forth over quote unquote good protocols. You know, that's a specific detection. And so, you know, in MITRE, right, like in attack, there's like sending stuff over HTTP, and they're not trying to get down into like, oh, this is how Cobalt Strike does it versus this is what something else is that does it. And so I don't know, maybe some of the variability you're seeing might come from that sort of thing, and just it all folds up into a good thing happening over a known protocol, and it's just not listing out specifics, because specifics are things that are like lower down on the pyramid of pain, where they just use different shapes of URLs or different things that wouldn't warrant their own tactic and technique, because they're really just using a good known protocol for doing bad things. So, you know, that if I was going to hazard a guess why you're under the impression you don't see as much network stuff as endpoint stuff, maybe that would be it. Anything else on that one, anyone?
This is a good question. I like this question a lot, actually. Thanks, Hamza, for coming up with this one. Visibility is often very limited on the network side, I find, client-wise, and I find from just people I know working at large organizations. We're talking like very large organizations. Most of them don't have SSL decryption. Most of them don't have next generation firewalls still. I'm calling them next gen. That's the salesy term, you know, application aware firewalls. They're not getting full URLs, especially for the SSL connectivity, and their visibility thus is kind of limited. They may not even get things like URL length. So I'm trying to think of some of the hunting stuff that I'm going to be including in, you know, in the ransomware course. And I'm thinking like, well, for RDP connectivity, a lot of folks, you know, are like, well, I don't have RDP connectivity, but they're not really hunting for it, and they're not really mapping given or known attacks to it. But a given or known attack could be something as simple as RDP inbound, right? Looking at destination port for you, like an internal destination port 3389. Now, if you have a Palo or something like that, then you can say protocol equals RDP, port is not 3389 or something like that, you know, and then you can even go further on top of that. If you have, again, protocol enabled stuff, you can also look at like, we used to monitor for port 80 over 443. And this is before a lot of the APT, especially those out of China, were not using a lot of SSL connectivity, and they were just trying to hide over 443 because they figured, well, people aren't capturing, they're not PCAPing 443 because they don't have decryption. So they're excuse me, saving disk space. But even then, I think it goes back to exactly what you said, John. It's more like, it's hard to categorize specific types of attacks as opposed to just, misuse or abuse of common network protocols. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there are a ton of those really mapped out. And I agree, nowhere near as well as they are for the endpoint, which is weird.
Yeah. In 450, we talk about a few things like, using the cookie field for command and control, using URLs, using the content, right? But those aren't really listed as separate tactics. So that sort of thing may be, part of it as well. But yeah, definitely good question. Next one, not as technical. Ravi asks, your favorite blogging platform? I can tell you my two, obviously WordPress. You got to be careful with WordPress. Don't install all the plugins on earth. Keep it stock as you can and keep it auto updating where possible. And the other one, if you want to go really lightweight, would be Ghost. I've written my first blog ever many, many years ago based on Ghost. And it's like, if you want to write a blog and you want it to look pretty good, like you can deploy Ghost in AWS Lightsail. It's like, if you're not familiar with Lightsail, it's kind of like AWS easy mode. You just say, I want Ghost, and then it just deploys it. And it's like $3 a month for an instance or for that, or WordPress or things like that. And so you can drop stuff out there really easily, log in and kind of get it going from there. For example, I own the domain name blueteamfit.com, and I set that up right before a summit that we had a while back, because I was like, I own it, let's put some up there. And because we were going to do a talk kind of like about not infosec stuff, and I was like, fitness and nutrition is one thing that's kind of a side hobby of mine. And so I was like, well, I bought it, I got to get that thing up so I can talk about it and point people there. And it's just a bunch of resources. And by the way, if you're trying to be healthy, a bunch of awesome stuff on there. I put that up on WordPress with AWS Lightsail in a few minutes. And if it gets compromised, then I don't really care. It's super, super basic, just an informational website with some links to other stuff. So that's what I've used in the past. And the way that I've deployed them has just been DigitalOcean or AWS Lightsail. It's super easy to just throw out an application ready to go. Either you want to throw anything in on that one?
No wonder you're still in shape. Certified nutrition coach. Oh, wow. Wow.
That was one of my quarantine hobbies. Yeah. I went through the Precision Nutrition Level 1 nutrition coach
that's
certification.
awesome. Yeah. I'm lame. I'm super lame. I use what I'm comfortable with, and I never learned anything past a lamp stack. So, people are like, oh, I use Mean and I spin up my own. No, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't do that personally. So I use WordPress. I have a website. It's WordPress. I'm sure at some point it will get popped, and it will be funny because it's a security practitioner saying, hey, look at me, how special I am. Here are all the presentations I've given. And it's going to be like, Ryan sucks. Yeah, I totally agree. I just try to not necessarily just lock it down, but try to keep it as vanilla and bland as, the more third-party code, the not better.
Yep. And turn those auto updates on. Mark, any blogging recommendations from you?
No, I'm like Ryan. I'm way past building out my own platform. I'll just use what I can pay for.
Yeah, there's something to be said about building it from scratch yourself. Sure, that is an awesome learning activity, but ultimately, if you just want a website, make the website the easy way and then do it the hard way for learning on a different thing so that you actually get something done, but then you learn the skills at the same time. It costs a couple dollars a month. That's why the cloud is so awesome. It makes things easy, right?
I can say I do have experience with Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress. And WordPress is by far the easiest for someone to just jump into and be like, page, create, and click and done. So yeah, they're all going to get popped. They all have horrible.
WordPress is considerably more complex than stuff like Ghost too. So if literally you want a not offensive looking, horrible, disgusting looking blog and you want it up in about 3 seconds, Ghost is your way to go. It just doesn't have the flexibility of everything that WordPress has. But if all you want to do is a basic InfoSec blog, check out Ghost. What tools do you recommend for adversary emulation? Anyone have a favorite in this category?
I do as of today. I just had a talk with George Ortiz from Scythe, and I am obsessed with the concept and the idea. And I'm going to be pursuing it further, and making sure that it's a potential thing for us to actually use potentially in my ransomware class. I love the idea, and I love the methodology that I saw, and saw it in action. I'm like, that's really cool. I think a lot of adversary emulation does not take into account user emulation, if you will. So you end up with these environments where if it's within your environment, that's one thing. You can have all your users and then an adversary come in, right? That's one thing. But what I mean is if you're building out a range or a lab or a test environment on your own, then you typically have these static, just Windows-based background noise, some bits jobs for Windows updates or whatever. And then you have your adversary coming in, and it can usually be very easy to identify. But I really like what Scythe has going on. I just learned about it today, though, so don't, hold me to like, how long have you been using it? Like a day, a whole day. But shout out to them. It looks pretty darn cool.
No, I was going to say Scythe also. I've known Bryson for a little while. They have a cool like modular approach and like very heavy on like automation. And I just like their kind of approach to the problem. But it's a really like varied space. Like you've got ones like them. You've got platforms that are meant really just for tracking. Like actually in Management 551, we use the open source tool Vector, right, John, to track like emulation. I've seen ones. There's one I'll have to think about it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like one of the agent-based ones that just launches attacks all around your network, like all the time from like agent to agent. So that's like a little bit different. So no, I think just, +1 for Scythe. They're pretty cool.
Well, there you go. The way I was going to take this is not so much a specific tool. I haven't used too many like adversary emulation tools, but I will say there's a bunch of stuff out there. There's like Meta from Uber, and there's Caldera and all those like sort of one-off test things or kind of atomic testing type items. But what I did want to say about this is if you are doing actually two things. If you are doing adversary emulation, one is I have a podcast with Jamie Williams coming out in 2 or 3 weeks, who is the adversary emulation lead from MITRE. And so that interview will have a whole bunch of detail on that. If you're interested in it, that's going to be on the Blueprint podcast sometime before the end of May. And then the other thing is tracking of adversary emulation, which is a whole different thing. Some frameworks may have it built in, some may not, or tools may have it built in and some may not. One of my favorite things for doing this is a open source tool called Vector. I just put the link to it in the comments. People are probably going to see that comment before they see me say that, and they're going to wonder what it is. But there you go. Vector is a tool that tracks Purple Team assessments, and you can, of course, set up a Purple Team as an adversary emulation exercise. And so that's a great way to say, these are the things we want to do, and that tool will say, did they work? Were they prevented? Were they blocked? Were they detected? Were they something that was successful? And you will set up these kind of events where you'll run these tests, do it a quarter later, do it half a year later, whatever, and it will track all of the instances where you've done that and the results. And you can kind of use that to show that regardless of what tool you're using for adversary emulation, that hopefully you're getting better at that over time. So that's a really nice tool for that sort of thing as well. Okay. There was another question, a quick one here. More love for your wall. Who made those drawings?
I love it. There's a guy, I have to be very careful to say his name because if you just Google him, you're going to find his Instagram page, and he does a lot of photography these days. And it's a lot of modeling photography, I should say. So you have to be just very careful pulling this website up like I just did right now. Let me close that. your work devices. But his name is Poppy Miranda, and I'm not sure if I should put his Instagram in here right now.
Go for it. Just don't open it on your work computer.
Just put his name. Yeah, put his name in there.
Just give me that heads up. If you open this, you're like, whoa, dude. Actually, I can't comment, so I'm going to pop it in the private chat. And then, John, if you could pop that over.
Yes, indeed.
And that way you posted it.
There you go.
So he does a bunch of art and stuff for like Comic-Con. He does body painting. Folks go and they have their body painted to be certain superheroes or whatever, and they go to Comic-Con. He's been working with, some very famous models and people recently. So he's got a lot of super nerdy stuff, but there's a lot of fairly adult-oriented pictures on his Instagram. So just be careful for that.
All right, there you go.
Nice.
Next question, interesting one. This is actually something I've wondered myself, so I don't know that I have a beautiful answer to this, but I'm stoked to know if one of you two do. Hi, I'm a CS student currently working on a small project where I analyze spam email headers and try to find patterns. Do you have any tips on receiving spam emails on purpose? Not something we all tend to want to do, but have you come up with a way of doing it?
I know of one platform, but first off, when we say spam, are we talking mal spam or are we just talking spam? Because they're very different.
Good question.
Or spam that includes links and or malicious attachments itself, whether it be credential harvesting or whether it be, Imitet or whatever downloaders. Imitet's retooling, but Dridex, Iced ID, Qbot, whatever. Or are we just talking general spam? See, is there a new comment in there with that?
I don't see it yet, but Matt, if you're still here, let us know whether you're looking for actually malicious email or spam type stuff. I'm going to guess he means malicious email.
I figure it's malicious. If you're looking for general spam, there's a tool that I may know about called Mailbait. It's mailbait.info. And you can go in there and just basically click run, and then you enter an email address in, and then you can choose a ton of categories to sign up that particular email address for a bunch of this mail. So I won't comment on potentially what its initial purpose, why was it written? It says never have an empty inbox.
You said it was mailbait.info?
Yeah, mailbait.info. I have to assume that's like, the new age freaking what was it, mail bomb from like the AOL days, but yeah, there's
Mail bomb.
There was one that I'm thinking of that I'm going to Mailbait real quick to see if it was actually the one that I've seen. Yeah, this is the one. In here, there is a malicious category, right? If you dig way into it.
Oh, is there?
It was hard to find. Yeah, because someone first told me about this. I'm like, oh, cool, but I want malicious email. They're like, no, it's there. And I'm like, where? I think it was in the third column. I don't remember.
Maybe the Pro Plus.
Yeah, there we go. A third from the bottom right.
Ransomware,
cryptoware, opt-in.
That's fantastic.
I don't know if it works, but that's the best answer I've come across. Mark, do you know of anything on this?
No.
Okay. Join a company. You'll get them. Other than having an established company email address, I don't know of any other easy way to force that because, maybe a different question. Anyone know, maybe Ryan in this case, where attackers are seemingly harvesting emails when you see spam waves of ransomware and stuff like that? Do you ever connect them to breaches or anything like that?
Sometimes they're breaches, but a lot of times they're just buying freaking lists from the dark web, from Tor-enabled. There's a bunch of them out there, a bunch of bazaars and stuff that all are like, hey, get 70 million email addresses for $10 or whatever. It's not very expensive. I don't know about $10. I made that up, but it's fairly easy to get those. And but something I just thought of, if you necessarily just want the emails themselves, as opposed to having the emails sent to you for analysis, if that makes sense. If you happen to have a virus total, they don't call it intelligence now. What is it? Enterprise account. You can just go in and you can actually do an advanced search for .eml files, and then you can harvest and download them in bulk, and then you can have a whole bunch of bad stuff. You can also do an advanced search where you do an and you choose a size over whatever, and that would probably, hopefully net you actual attachments to those emails versus links that may be dead at that point. But even if it did have links and they were malicious emails, you'd get a whole bunch of them. So that's one option I can think of right now, but not everyone has Virus Total Enterprise.
Yeah, I'm guessing since Matt said he's a CS student, I don't know if there's a student way in. Usually, if you're not familiar with Virus Total, the Enterprise is a rather pricey but super nice paid subscription thing. But they do have Researcher accounts, and I would assume a student is also a researcher because that is literally what you're doing. So you could always ask for that. I don't know what their qualifications are for that one, but that's super cool if you can get that.
I have another idea. Brad Duncan, who's awesome, and I love this guy, has been running a site called malwaretrafficanalysis.net for many years now, since 2013. He's got a bunch of posts in here, and a lot of these they basically discuss malicious traffic, right? He kind of highlights how the traffic, what it looks like as it's doing. It's bad stuff, right? Many of the posts that he has in here, they begin with emails, and many times he includes the actual emails in the artifacts.zip file. I don't know if he has a bulk, download this entire year or whatever, but if you were to go through, you could probably get hundreds of the known bad malicious emails by just going to malware-traffic-analysis.net.
Yeah, that's an awesome website for sure. All right. Next one from Casey. Where do you draw the line between sim tuning and hunting? Is there a difference? How do orgs actually normalize /baseline / establish detections when they onboard the log sources? Mark.
So I think one of my favorite soapboxes is that hunting has to have some kind of output. There has to be some result. And tuning, I think, is one of the possible results of a hunt. So if you're hunting, you are using a variety of different techniques to go search for non-obvious evidence of malicious activity, right? Or like an incident that happened that you missed, something that your automated alerts aren't picking up. And so you may find that thing. You may find that you don't have the right telemetry to find that thing. Whatever the case, in many cases, tuning will be like one of the outcomes of that process. So, we need to go turn on this, logging, or like do some enrichment, or hey, we found a thing and we didn't alert on it, so let's go create an alert, tune appropriately. So that's how I think about the hunting tuning relationship, is tuning happens after hunting. How often do organizations actually normalize baseline established detections? Very rarely. In my experience, it's we turned on the log, check, let's move on, and then never mention it again. So one of the things that I think is really great about both Sec 450 and Management 551 is we talk about building a detection pipeline, and you have to like treat that pipeline, that logging pipeline, as like a system that you have to manage and monitor and prune and improve over time, which means collecting metrics, making changes, monitoring the health of those things, and I think that's part of a like detection engineering discipline, which I think is cool, in that it's becoming more of a distinct discipline in SOCs or in security teams, but again, my experience, a lot of organizations aren't treating it like that at this point. It's we stand up a SIM, we turned on the log source, we're good. We're obviously, that's just the start of that process.
Yeah. Ryan, did you have something to add to that?
I recognized who that was, so shout out to Casey. How's it going? I was like, is that you? Yeah. So Casey and I had a couple heated discussions with Tom also. Hi, Tom, if you're out there, from last job. And it was around MITRE, actually. And we were like, yeah, so we're going to go through and we're going to hunt. We had these hunting sessions scheduled. It was a great idea. Schedule hunting sessions. Awesome. And we were basically sitting down and we're like, all right, we're going to pick this MITRE particular, a couple of these little guys, and then we're going to hunt. And, Tom and Casey were both like, aren't we just tuning our sim? And I was like, no, we're hunting. And they're like, you sure? We went back and forth and back and forth. So I really like, what you said concerning really to hunt, you first have to establish that baseline, because as you're hunting, that's part of what you're doing, right? I think really there's 4 categories that I lump people into, or groups into, in terms of logging. You've got enabled logs pushing to a SIM or to an aggregator, whatever, right? Splunk, Elk, whatever. And then you've got people who actually parse the damn things when they come in, which you get the fields you actually care about versus literally just having, underscore raw and Splunk and whatever Splunk pulls out randomly. Then you've got the folks who identify the actual baselines and try to identify, these things show up the most commonly. And then you've got folks who actually start to build alerts, and those folks who are building alerts based on that data, a big part of what you have to do to build those alerts out, you can't build any alert without letting it fire a couple times, running a query, baselining what's coming back, and then saying like, okay, well, not that, or not that. Okay, well, or not that, that kind of thing, or tuning your query appropriately. So what I see people logging these days, which is very exciting, but I don't see them even parsing freaking fields that they may need or want. Oh, we have Alien Vault. Like, okay, that's fine. I'm not a huge fan myself of Alien Vault over something like Splunk or Elastic, but it's nice to have Alien Vault logs. Don't get me wrong. But then when I look at it and there's nothing actually parsed out, it's just the raw log got ingested, and Alien Vault itself was just like, oh, there's a source IP, a dest IP, and a message or something like that. I'm like, cool story. So I just tell I'm like, what? Just export it in text to me, and I'll parse it. And I go write my own Logstash or Python. That's a lie. I use Logstash. I write my own Logstash parser and just do it myself. So, anywho, yeah, Casey, it's very difficult to say we're going to hunt and we're going to hunt because a big part of hunting is you have to do those baselines. Every query you run, cmstp.exe, a random MITRE thing, that's a pretty decent fidelity query. Meanwhile, Reg Server 32 is not a pretty, not at all. You're going to get it all over the place, right? So I think that they really go hand in hand, and I think it's really, really hard to separate the two when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. I would also just say that there are some hunts that don't involve tuning your SIM.
Yes.
So sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Certainly. The way I was going to approach this question is maybe a little bit different. I look at these, what does it take to hunt question, right? You have to have the data. The data has to be parsed, as Ryan said. And then you also have to know what you're looking for. And those are kind of different things, right? When you say, how do you draw the line between SIM tuning and SIM hunting? When I read that question, what I thought was like, well, they're very different, right? Although if you're talking about alerts, maybe they're less different than what I was originally thinking of when I saw that. What I was thinking was like SIM tuning, right? To me is, are we collecting the things we do need to have and not collecting the things we don't need to have? And then from there, you get this stream of events, right? And not all those events are bad things, but you have to pick up all your HTTP or you're not going to pick the bad HTTP. And so SIM tuning to me is like, do we have HTTP from everywhere to everything else? Are we parsing it? Is it usable for hunting? And then, and as a separate thing, one day I'm going to sit down and say, okay, I want to see all of the user agents available on this network and sort them by frequency or whatever, right? I want to see who's going to the longest URLs. I want to see who's the one unique device that's talking to this, HTTP server that no one's ever talked to before and no one else is talking to still. That's kind of a different thing, but the tuning enables that to happen. And so certainly if you're looking at tuning alerts coming in, then these two kind of overlap. But if you're talking about tuning for events coming in that are not all bad, but some are bad with your analytics when they match on certain things, then that's kind of a different thing. So that's maybe how I would break down this question. Okay, next one. I'm going to pre-apologize because I don't have a great answer for this one. I don't know. Has anyone here been through the SANS MSISC program? Okay, so I'm considering the SANS MSISC program to be competitive as a cybersecurity candidate. Is it worth $700+ a month? Willing to pay for a Cyber Ninja Spy school? Maybe. So the MSISC program, I have not been through it. I pulled up the website to see all of the things that are involved in doing that. And as general with any of the SANS Technology Institute kind of graduate certificates or undergrad programs or otherwise, it involves taking a bunch of SANS courses, right? And so if you're interested in taking a lot of SANS courses, then they are a great option for you. All of the people, I will say, that have come out of this program that I do know of seem to be really, really good at what they do, like in a practical, real world sense. This particular program, the ISC Information Security Engineering curriculum, you get 9 GIAC certs. As a person that walks around a lot of SANS events and sees name tags that all have people's list of certs on them, there are very few people that have 9, let alone like more than 2 or 3. There are occasionally people that have the entire stack, and awesome for them. The other cool thing about this is you get the GSE at the end. Well, you take the GSE at the end. For those who aren't familiar with that one, the GSE is like the mega cert, right? It is the cert to end all certs. And it requires you to take, it's like 5 or 6 different classes. And then it's this like mega hands-on thing across. You take a test to see if you can take the test, and then you take the hands-on part of the test and all sorts of other stuff. And I don't know a single GSE that isn't completely awesome. So if this thing necessarily ends in you getting a GSE, I would say it's going to certainly help you become very, very good at cybersecurity, because I don't know anyone with those credentials that isn't. So could you do it other ways? Yeah, there are probably other ways of doing it. Are there more efficient ways of doing it than this in terms of time? Probably not. SANS classes are pretty quick and they cram a lot of data at you very, very fast. Are there more efficient terms in terms of money? I don't know. I haven't looked at cybersecurity training out there, alternative ones. I will say from my personal experience, I did get a master's in cybersecurity, and it was not super practical. The SANS classes I know are very practical, but take that as you will. Obviously, we all work for SANS, so there you go.
What you just said, I also have a graduate degree, and mine was in information assurance, and my 500 and 600 level classes were nowhere near as technical as the courses that are included in this particular program. I would have loved the opportunity. I specifically sought out a school that was a center of academic excellence, or a CAE through the NSA. And that's why I chose my school. And I think for the 2 years alone, for the last 2 years, I think it was not too far off of $40K. So for this price, and given the difference in that, most of my technical courses were 300 and 400 level courses. So I think it could have been a lot more eye-opening to have that level of experience and that many SANS certs after with a program. But again, we're all SANS instructors. So we're like, yeah, it's great, dude.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, look, the way I always say it, like, yeah, I work and teach for SANS, but I didn't my entire life. Like, taking SANS courses is what put me and got me here. So they worked very, very well for me. So, I'm sure everyone else on the call can say the same thing.
And Western Governors University, WGU, has made, for many, many years now, a name for itself. And a big thing that they do is they focus on certifications, and you test and you get certifications throughout. And when you have your degree, you've got X number, 10 plus certifications. This is just that next level. The certifications are not your standard, CompTIAs or what have you. They're freaking GIAC certifications. So,
yeah. All right. What do we have next here? There was one on Styx and Taxi, I think was the next one. Oh, wait, nope. Here we go. One from Jack. Brian, I think this is your question. Why is reverse engineering important for the blue team?
I'm wondering if this is also the Jack. So first off, I did a podcast yesterday, and we were talking about the difference between malware analysis and reverse engineering. So without going into a whole Ryan rant right now, trademark, right? I guess we'll say reverse engineering, also including general malware analysis, looking at doc files and things of that nature. I think it's critical to have an understanding of it. I don't know that it's critical to go as deep as some folks, for example, myself, have gone. That's the SANS course I teach right now is 610. I get to be with those awesome folks and teach that stuff. I don't do RE on a daily basis. Now, I do deobfuscate scripts and things like that on a daily basis, but as an IR person, and previously coming from a very large, very specific SOC/CERT environment, we didn't do RE on a daily basis. However, it was critical to understand what the heck you're finding in your environment, in your network, in order to connect the dots on what's going on with that particular attack. If you're in a SOC, for example, and you get an email and the email's forwarded to you from a user, and it has an attached Word file, if you have no idea how to analyze that thing, and I mean no idea, like you don't even know how to use, whether it's on-prem, hopefully, or not, like Cape or just Cuckoo or even VirusTotal, careful for uploading stuff to VirusTotal, you're limited in like, oh, yeah, it could be bad, so how are you going to analyze that? You have to have some capability to analyze that document in order to truly understand the type of threat that you're facing. Many systems, especially when you're in a SOC, you're often going to get those types of files forwarded to you, and there's no automation system built in that says, hey, this is bad. It's your determination. And so I think a big part of blue teaming is understanding at least the basics of malware analysis and reverse engineering. I don't think every blue teamer needs to know how to go into Ghidra or to IDA and flip through code and trace functions and comment out an entire database. Like I said, I don't do that every day myself, but I think it's very, very handy to be able to say like, oh, this is the .NET file. Oh, .NET is super readable sometimes. I'll drop it onto DN Spy. Oh, look, there's the freaking source code, decompiled because .NET makes it easy and it's not obfuscated. Cool. There's an IP address. Let's see if we have hits to that IP address, that kind of stuff. So I think that it's very, very beneficial in understanding truly what you're identifying or what you're dealing with on the blue team.
Yeah, I would echo the exact same thing. In 450, I took exactly that approach. I've taken 610. I love that course. It's super cool. You feel like a magic wizard when you take apart malware and you get into Ghidra and do all that fun stuff. But I also say like 90% of the time, like you're just deobfuscating a macro, you're extracting a file that's embedded in a Word document or whatever. And so like, you don't need to be a total master at this. You need to pull a URL out of a PDF without opening the PDF or something like that, right? A lot of those things are the practical everyday type stuff. Every once in a while, you do get into the nation state malware and you really have to figure out, how do I interpret this command and control that went over our network already because something might have left the building. But that's a rare day. It's a fun day, but it's a rare day when that kind of stuff comes up. All right. Next, we have, what do you think about Styx taxi utility? Does it have a future for the characterization of TTPs? Anyone want to jump on this one?
Remember OpenIOC files when everyone just used OpenIOC and you were just like, here's my OpenIOCs, can I have yours? that was so much different. Personally, I think Styx and Taxi are far more applicable to government type of info sharing, and I see that a lot more. But if we're just talking about setting up a MISP instance and then sharing, control via those, that's something else. I think that I don't know what I think, to be honest, because I kind of love it. And then I also just wish there were other easier ways to share data. I wish that we had just galaxies and MISP that would be more open, that folks would be more apt to share. As someone who's really into ransomware, I love that internally we have our ransomware TTPs and IOCs that are all warehoused, right? So I think what I'm getting at, I think the limitations of Taxi specifically is not just the technology, but I think a big part of why it didn't become a bigger thing is because folks are still not as apt to share data. If a consulting agency, we can't share data for the most part. I can't share my client stuff, not mine. So there's that. And then internally, anything that's targeted, you have to be pretty open, to be like, hey, we got hit with this, sucks for us, because what are you telling the world at that point? And you're like, wait, what? You got what now? So I think that process side of it has really kind of stuck it in the mud, if you will, for the real utility that we could have if we all just agreed to share.
Yep, that's what I'm always saying. Like, the more that we share, the less we have to deal with. But I get why people don't want to do it, right? No one wants to admit to being breached and all those kind of things. So it always, becomes a hot button issue. So there you go. This question, I think, might be a good one for Mark. If you were to build a cybersecurity program at a new organization, which I know that you are often involved in helping people do, what security products / technologies would you install first? For example, would you install SIM first? What would you prioritize?
Trick question. I would do a bunch of IT management first. They're actually, so Ryan mentioned Twitter earlier as like a good source of info, and there have been over like the last couple of years, I've seen like a handful of Twitter threads that have started this way. Like, what are the first things you would do? And there's some good discussion always in those threads. I think as John well knows, we talk in some of our blue team classes about the CIS top 20 controls. These are prioritized set of controls informed by like real attacks and industry research that start with some very basic like IT management type stuff, right? Getting a system inventory, software, hardware, doing vulnerability assessment. So now, like when I work with clients to build out security teams or try to improve what they're doing, I mean, we start with those basic things. If you don't know what you have, any of us that have worked in a SOC that have seen an alert and then tried to chase down like what a system is and who owns it and has spent like hours and hours trying to do that very basic thing knows that having an inventory is super awesome and it's really helpful, and it forms a lot of what you do, what you prioritize, how you respond. I mean, all sorts of things flow from that. So, I think the top 20 controls, that's a really good kind of reference model. Barring that, as far as security controls, I think endpoint data, network data, however you're getting that, great places to start. Increasingly, I find like identity data. So I work with clients that are really heavily leveraged in the cloud. So to like, kick in the door and say like, I need all your network logs, not very straightforward. And frankly, they don't care as much about that, but they do care a lot about identity and credentials and keys and, all that good stuff. So I think some of it is very environment specific. I think, network and host visibility, super important, should be like near the top of the list. But I think, in general, if you're building a brand new cybersecurity program, go make friends with the IT group, talk about things like inventory, talk about vulnerability assessment. You really need to spend a lot of time getting the lay of the land and becoming an expert in your environment, in your infrastructure first, before you go out and buy a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I would echo exactly that. I was exactly thinking like CIS top 20, right? There you go. That tells you exactly what your priorities are. And they apply nearly universally to everyone. And they have it broken up, by the way. If you haven't seen, in the newest version, 7.1 has what's called implementation groups. And so if you're a small org, it says do this. If you're a medium org, do this. If you're a large org, do this. And those things are a great way to start if you don't know what to go for. Beyond that, though, as Mark said, and as we've mentioned several times, with every good security question, the answer is it depends. And what it depends on in this case is, what are you doing, right? How much in the cloud are you? Are you a BYOD? Everything goes to the cloud? Do you have a bunch of on-prem stuff? Do you have on-prem at all? If everyone is just 30 employees flung across the globe remoting into GCP, that's very different than one office building that is largely one network. And so, okay, how do you make the decision then, right? Look at the type of attacks that you would expect to have, threat intelligence, right? If you can figure out what your attackers are likely to do to you and how they're going to do it, then that will drive you to pick the right, hopefully, set of tools and logging and capabilities that would help you find those things. And so I would say threat intelligence driven priorities on top of the CIS top 20. One for Ryan here, two-parter. Regarding ransomware, it seems to be getting harder for orgs to decide between identifying full scope of an incident and playing whack-a-mole, since the attackers are increasingly destructive in the environment. How do you decide when is the best time to eradicate/remediate?
First off, hi Jason, how's it going? We work together.
All your friends are here. That's awesome.
Of course you do.
I tweeted it out like, hey. I think a big thing that we all keep in the back of our minds, whether we use the terminology or not, is the Mandiant strike zone that they came up with, I don't know how many years ago, 2010, 9, whatever. And the idea being is learning to understand the threat actor who's in your environment and not immediately striking. If you immediately strike against them, but they have other capabilities that you've not yet enumerated, meaning you're just not familiar with other stuff they're able to do, other footholds they have in your environment, access methods, or whatever, quite frankly, you're just going to piss them off. And if you do that, and then they up their game completely, their activity spikes, and now you're even further behind, so the 8 ball, and you can't do what you need to do. So, Mandiant has positioned it that you learn as much as you possibly can about the threat actor and the tools and stuff. And when you start to level out, when you start to be like, okay, they're getting in via this VPN, via this RDP host over here, they're doing this. They're running just Mimikatz for password dumping. They're not actually dumping LSS memory, like these kind of things. The more you know about it, the more you're like, okay, if we swing now, right, we're not going to strike out. We're going to knock it out of the park because we're going to stop all the things they're capable of doing. Meanwhile, if you wait too long and you wait past that curve, they're going to just start retooling on their own. And then their activity and their capabilities, their malware backdoors or rats or Trojans, whatever you want to call it, start to increase. And now you've missed that opportunity. So on paper, that's cute. When it comes to ransomware, it used to be that you would have someone click and then you'd have a machine infected. And then a lot of times it'd be that one machine was ransomed, right? Some type of locker. And then you'd have propagating worms, SMB type of activity. And it'd be like, a LAN or a subnet or whatever that would be ransomed. Now, when you have what Microsoft calls humor.
Human operated ransomware.
Yeah, I was like, what's that word I say all the time?
Humor, as they acronymed it.
Yeah. Human operated ransomware, these folks can be in your environment for weeks or months at a time, but we're seeing even groups like Ryuk, I'll say, and Conti, and pretend they're not the same people, that they are now within like 3 or 4 days, they're doing all the data exfil and stealing all your stuff. And the TTPs that we see from the big groups, Ryuk as a great example, and Maze when they were still around as Maze, it was very specific. They would be very specific tools you would see popped into the environment. They wouldn't be renamed. It would be, 80fine.exe. Process Hacker would be called p8.exe. Mimikatz would be m64.exe, right? These are all things you'll still see today. If you see those things, my personal recommendations at this point is obviously you have to involve your legal counsel, and obviously you have to make that decision like, hey, we may piss some people off here and it could get worse. But if you think it's one of those initial entry vector / moving laterally in your environment, I would say whatever you do know about the attack, stop it. Stop the freaking attack, because I would much rather, and this is personal, this is not on behalf of my employer, okay? So I would much rather take let's avoid a ransomware situation at all costs. I have a case right now where a client saw a SIM alert. They didn't realize they most likely had a ransomware actor in the environment, but they responded within like 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours, and they found the initial entry vector machine. They rebuilt it, disabled that person's account. They didn't realize there was a bunch of lateral movement that happened on a server that was going through that laptop. But because they acted so quickly, in our incident report, it's like all this bad stuff, and then just stopped. It's like, what happened? Why did it stop? You rebuilt the laptop. They didn't yet set up additional persistence. You got lucky. You got real lucky. So with ransomware, because of how destructive, and the other thing is they're exfilling your data left and right. The longer you give them in your environment, now that wait and see approach was, even for ransomware, may have been cool before they started ripping off your data constantly. But if you don't know for a fact that you're going to be able to see any data exfil, and you're not going to be able to see any of it almost in the environment, my recommendation is as soon as you realize this is a ransomware threat actor, get them out of your freaking environment, make them work harder, and make sure you have your eyes on your tools so that when they do start to work harder, you see it.
How do they normally exfil data in your experience?
They'll use some groups are using FTP. Super common to see FTP, including, I'm blanking on the Windows API call. But there's a Windows API call. She's like, FTP that way. Like, it's super common. Standard ports, nothing special. We're seeing a lot of upload to Mega, and we're seeing a ton of rclone. Rclone is a synchronizing agent that will essentially clone data out, and there's all kinds of different places you can store that data. Like if you look up rclone.org, you'll see that the supported providers, there's this massive list. Google Drive, FTP, HTTP, mail.ru cloud, OVH provider, OVH, classic OVH. We're seeing a whole bunch of rclone, and we're seeing Mega used quite a bit. And there's also sites like file. I'm blanking now. What is it? File.fz, I think it is. These third-party sites where they're basically just shooting your data out. One of the things I recommend to any group looking for data exfiltration, and it's going to be covered in the class, right? A whole section on how to identify it if it happened. Not just looking for stage files, not just looking for archives on the system, but also if you happen to have those application-aware firewalls or firewalls that do URL categorization, you immediately get your freaking eyes, if you don't have it now, on cloud sharing, whatever that category is called for your firewall. If it's called cloud sharing, okay, what do you allow? Oh, we allow box. Okay, don't allow anything else. Alert on any other attempt and follow up. We allow these 3. Okay, well then allow those 3. Block the rest, or at the very least, alert on the rest, because you don't expect that they're just going to shoot that off to Mega or something simple, and that's what we're seeing all the time now.
Yeah, I asked that question specifically because that's one of the things we always talk about too, is like, if you see an alert and that alert looks like data exfil, like you need to act right now. However, what does data exfil look like, right? And not everyone knows that, and not every attacker does it the same. But like when it's really dumb stuff like FTP, like why is FTP turned on? Well, we have to use FTP everywhere to everywhere. No. Every person has to use FTP? No. You have a next-gen firewall. You can tie FTP to the people who have to use it to the place it has to be used to. And if you chop that off, you're further squeezing them in and forcing them to use stuff that is, less favorable maybe. I don't know, rclone sounds like it has a whole bunch of protocols it supports, but as soon as you see the alert of someone tried to FTP out to a random IP address, firewall deny, now you have a serious problem from that machine, and it's time to drop the steel doors on that system and anything else that's taught to, right? And figure it out very quick. So, yeah, good question on that one. Question from Nate Roberts. I've worked as a software engineer for 2 years, but want to get into the blue team side of security. If I have to convince my employer to pay for a 1 SANS course, where would you suggest to start? For blue team, the curriculum, depending on the kind of job you're looking to do. If you're looking to get into SOC analysis, Sec 450 is the course I wrote squarely for that job role. That would be my answer to that. If you've been doing it for a while, then 511 might be the better follow-up on that one. That's more threat hunting, advanced, kind of senior analyst centric. If you want to get into engineering and architecture stuff, setting up a very defensible network, Sec 530 is a really good one for that sort of thing. 555 is great if you want to dive deep into SIM and threat hunting. We have some new stuff. It's probably not best for the first course, but 586 is a defensive PowerShell course that it's going to be coming out here very, very soon. We just got the website up for that one. Somewhat job specific, but I would say 450 would be a great place to start if you're looking for practical, like I'm going to walk through, this is a SIM, this is a threat intel platform, this is how they connect, this is the data that goes through it. That's the kind of stuff that's in that course. We walk through all the important network protocols, all the log files, analysis techniques, alert tuning, all the bread and butter of working in a SOC.
Yeah. Hey, Nate, just wanted to say, hey, I would also add to that, if the challenge is getting them to pay when you have been in a software engineer role and not in a security role, I mean, that can certainly be a challenge. The main thing is look for how it can benefit them. So if there is any part of your work that you do, or if you can socially engineer your way into talking to, working with, doing something that has to do with security, that's, that you can sort of tie to a class you want to take, that's the best way to do it. Employers are going to be really stingy if they don't really see a link between what they're paying for. Like, they don't want to pay for you to train for your next employment or your next job, right? So just try to find a way to make it relevant to them, and ideally to your job, although I know it may be tough.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say and forgot, but that reminded me, is we have programs to make the tuition for a course significantly less or zero, depending on who you are and where you are. There is the SANS work study program. If you just Google Stands work study. It's like you help them set up the classroom, which right now virtually means basically not much at all. You have to show up a little bit before class, help people, install whatever it is if needed. And you get a very, very big discount on courses for that if it's a budget issue. There's also the cyber academies for veterans and various other programs that are out there. So there's a lot of ways in terms of the cost of it. It can be reduced as well. So dig a little bit into the SANS site, you'll find that stuff. What else do we have here? Drone footage. Has the red team or actual hackers come into the the stream here? Is cybercrime profitable? What attack methods can generate the most money?
Someone were trying to get started, like say, I don't know, this weekend. Where would
How do I form the email that people will click on? The easy answer to this is yes, it is certainly profitable. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. If you're curious how profitable it is, look at the IC3 report from the FBI recently released. There is to the tune of, I want to say, $4 billion of damages somewhat related to cybersecurity over the last year. And that's pretty similar to the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. So yes, that is a thing that people like. What generates the most money? Well, let's reverse that question. What causes the most damage? Business email compromise and ransomware. Ryan, I don't know if you have any dollar sign that attaches to the average ransomware compromise. I've read some, but they've kind of been all over the place.
They change all the time. I don't trust them. You can, Codeware, by the way, does have some phenomenal statistics. I like a lot of the reports they put out, but they're different every. I don't trust any of them. I do know that BEC, however, was the big girl this year and potentially last year so far in terms of dollar amounts. Also, really in terms of complexity, right? Because a lot of these are just like, hey, send me the money. But yeah, it's definitely profitable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have jobs and be so enthralled against these folks. Drone.
Yep. The funny thing about BEC is it's so damaging, and it's just like you just ask for the money and they give it to you. Yeah. Now there's a little bit of caveat on how you ask for that money, but yeah, interesting attack. All right. Well, I think we've hit the bottom of the question list, and we're at about an hour and 40 minutes, so that's probably about a good time to cut it off for today. To close it up, I will say thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us. Your questions feed the discussion here. So I'm sure we will do this again. I don't know when it will be. I am teaching next week, so it will not be next week, but maybe the week after that, and after that, and after that. We'll see how it goes. Beyond that, we have a couple things I want to say about what's coming up. We have a Blue Team Summit for SANS. It is a free virtual event. It's going to happen on September 9th. If you just Google Blue Team Summit, you'll find it. I don't have a short link ready for that one, but why would you not sign up for a free 2-day summit full of awesome talks? I don't know. So go do that. Make sure that is something on your calendar. It's way ahead. Beyond that, we have some coupon codes. I'm blanking on what they are off the top of my head. Again, if you go to Twitter and look up the SANS Cyber Defense Twitter handle, it's been tweeted out several times over the last couple of days, and it is a code that is valid not much longer, but it's like $500 off classes. So there's that if you're interested in that. Other than that, if you haven't yet, subscribe, hit the notify thing, and you will be told anytime we start one of these talks in the future and any other videos I put out. If you haven't seen the 12 Days of Defense and other videos, I plan on doing some other stuff like that when I have some time. In the meantime, I'll be doing these, and you don't want to miss them. So subscription's the easiest way to do that. Plus, YouTube gives me love, and it makes us feel better when we get likes and clicks and all that weird stuff. And it inspires us to do more of this stuff because we're all slaves to algorithms now, right? So there you go. What else? Ryan, are you teaching anytime soon? What's your next class?
I am. I'm going to have it's a private run though. It's going to be in Virginia, but it will be private, and it's with a phenomenal, cool group who I can't mention.
I wonder who it is.
So and then after that, I'm in Sydney in September, and potentially going to be involved with the Deeper Summit in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully.
Very cool. And then the other thing, Mark and I have the first ever 5-day run of 551. So if you're interested in joining that, that is the last full week of May. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but easy to find. That is our SOC management course. So if you're interested in being taught 5 days of material on SOC management from both Mark and I, rare that you get 2 instructors for 1 class, but since it's the first run, you'll get that and the one after that, which is 2 weeks later. Those courses are available. So with that, thanks so much, everyone, for showing up for the webcast. All of this information obviously is going on YouTube. So if you want to scroll back and hear anything we said and review it in terms of tools or tactics or anything we talked about, it will be there. With that, thanks for showing up, and we will catch you all later. Have a absolutely wonderful weekend, and talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.